kind of tries to turn it
Yeah,
into a comedy skit.
yeah. He's very charismatic, and I mean that makes a big difference, right? So a lot of the ideas that he talks about are probably pretty commonplace, but are not as easy to grasp, and
Hmm.
so maybe I just never heard of him because of that. I don't know.
Now, what are you laughing at?
Well, his section on transport he begins with a sentence. Let's start with kimchi quesadillas. I'm a big fan of fusion food: hot and sour bacon, breakfast pizza, enchilasagna, caramel cheesecake wontons, pineapple burgers, creme brulee, pavlova, butter duck poutine. Bring
You're
it
making me
on.
puke, man. It all sounds. I don't know if it all sounds horrible, but damn, some of it does.
Sounds like Canadian food.
Yeah. Hey, it looks like we got one person watching us on YouTube. Stay in there, YouTube person. We're still setting stuff up.
Hello, YouTube person.
Are you still sharing screen? Oh yeah. Whoever YouTube person, you're staring at Steven Grumbine. It's something that me and oh, YouTube person left. Fuck him. Okay.
Mass deal with the federal government require.
Okay, let's not do that then.
Okay. I'm gonna throw this up. I'm gonna use the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay. So let's do another test recording. Actually, no. We're gonna do a test recording right before we go live. How about that? So let's get all these links. I'll post it in Telegram. Oh no, that's not what I want. This is Twitter. There we go. And then we got YouTube. And then we got Odyssey. I forgot. Did you want me to leave the link? I mean the thumbnail that comes up.
Which link?
So I just shared on Telegram all our links, our streaming links, and you I left the thumbnail in there. I seem to remember you wanted me to take out the thumbnail for some reason. Am I remembering that correctly?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay, very good. I'll share this on Garb. I'll share this on Tweaker. No, we don't have enough space. And then I'll do Facebook. Oh, you fucker. Okay, stand by. Ah. Passwords. Okay, go to pages and profile. What the? How do I make a post on Facebook? Ah, switch to the page to start managing it. Got it. Okay, we're posted around the biggins. Let's do a sound test. All right, Nima, 1, 2, 3. Go for it.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3.
Replaying it. All right, Nima, 1, 2, 3. Go for it.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
We sound good there. Do you want to pull this up on one of the streams and see how we sound? Testing. This is Dylan of IridaTV, waiting for Nima to pull up a stream to see how we sound on the other side of that stream. You got us pulled up yet? Did I lose you?
Sounds good.
Sounds good? Sweet. Okay. Let's close this shit so it's not distracting. Quit Telegram. Close this folder. Okay, all the rest of the stuff I need. Very good. All right. Is you ready?
Yeah.
Here we go.
We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Hello, this is Dylan Moore and Nima Major of IridaTV coming to you. It is Boxing Day, December 26th, 2022. Coming to you from a country where we don't really typically even know what that is or care about it, but I did live in Europe for a short amount of time, and they stuffed me fitfully on Boxing Day, so I do remember that. Nima, did you guys ever celebrate Boxing Day in Germany?
No.
No?
Actually, I never heard about that.
What? Must be a Catholic thing then, because in Austria they're ostensibly Catholic, and I guess where you're from, the Protestant Reformation heretics took over long ago.
Protestant, absolutely, yeah. Berlin is where I grew up, and you know, it's basically mostly Protestant.
Or you mean, or is it mostly nihilist now?
Yeah, well, I guess that's what Protestantism is. It's like a atheism factory. Protestantism, Catholicism.
How many people did we just manage to
Turns
offend?
people into atheists.
Now that you're suitably offended and pissed off, please listen to the rest of our sponsors. We don't have any sponsors. So we're kind of on this vein because we've been watching the last two shows. We've been going over, like, you know, is there a logical explanation for the existence of God and a overview of Gnosticism and kind of the occult influences of that. And so that's we're kind of on that vein. And leaping from that vein, I mentioned this last time, is I wanted to get into a subject that's near and dear to my heart, which is intellectual self-defense. I first stumbled across this term from the Peace Revolution podcast. I'm sure Nima had the same experience where I don't know, this was like 2010, 2011. Jan Irving from Gnostic Media Podcast, I guess it's Logos Media Podcast now, stumbled across this guy named Gene O'Denning, who reintroduced the concept of the trivium into the internet sphere. And then for at least some sub-corner of nerds in the internet like us, we got really into this trivium thing. Yeah, so this is Tragedy and Hope, with Richard Andrew Grove. I guess Grand Theft World is the new thing that they're doing, but he used to do a podcast called Peace Revolution Podcast. So the trivium really focused on, and just to be clear, we're not going to be doing the trivium today. I'm doing something completely different that you probably have never heard of. But the trivium focuses on, okay, what's the classical use of grammar and logic and rhetoric in figuring out basically a bullshit detector, or as the ruling elite prefer to use it, as a bullshit purveyor, right? I make sure that you can't think that way, so my rhetoric of bullshit, you're unable to parse what's going on, right? So that kind of led me down the path of intellectual self-defense and got me very interested in it. And over the years, I think I developed something, me personally. I think I developed something which is a incredibly useful tool, or I should say an incredibly useful symbolic map for identifying, which is the big thing that we're going to talk about today, and then B, what to do about it when you identify somebody trying to manipulate you. And I want to start this with a story that I've told Nima before, so please don't roll your eyes. It involves a situation when I was in Germany. Wasn't with a German dude, though. So I lived in Europe for like 2.5 years. I bought a one-way plane ticket. I left, and I lived in Austria and floated around Europe from there as kind of this quasi-misadventuring vagabond. And at some point, I joined this martial arts group for this Russian martial art called Sistema. And I was living in Vienna, and there was this big... the head cheese of Sistema was coming to Augsburg, Germany, which is like a good 5-hour drive from Vienna, right? And so our Sistema group got in the car. Well, actually, I hitchhiked. They got the car. I hitchhiked to Augsburg, which was a incredibly fun day. And they got in the car, and we went and we participated in a seminar. And the Friday that... So the seminar was going to be over the weekend. The Friday, all these people from all over Europe. I mean, someone from Japan, someone from the United States came, because like this is the big cheese in this Sistema world, right? Doing the seminar, and we were at this, as stereotypical we can get. We went to a Russian sauna the Friday night before we started, where they where you whack each other with the bundles of leaves and stuff, and they had food there, so you could order Russian food afterwards. And so all these people start congregating, right? And as the misadventuring vagabond that I was, I didn't really have a lot of money, and I didn't really have a lot of clothes. And so I had this T-shirt on that I had made while I had lived in Vermont. We had a T-shirt press in the basement, and it said "Fluoride kills" on it. Now, most people listening to this are probably familiar with the fluoride argument. You probably lean in the same direction that we do on it. However, in Europe, it's kind of an empty political statement, because I think other than like Ireland and certain parts of the UK, they don't fluoridate. Thank God. Right? But I'm broke, and it's the clothes I had, so that's what I'm wearing. So our friends from Vienna, my friends from Vienna, we're all sitting around this table. We order food, and then this guy walks over. Never seen him. He's sitting at the other table and introduces himself. And then he said, "Yeah, I'm from the Ukraine." His English was impeccable. "I'm from the Ukraine, and I want to ask you about your shirt." And my food had just arrived, and I'm really freaking hungry. And I'm like, I really don't want to talk about this right now, but I am wearing the shirt. So it seems silly for me to wear the shirt and not talk about it, because that was the whole point of the fucking shirt, is to get people to talk about it, right? So I say, okay, fine. So he sits down like right next to me, right here. And he goes, "So tell me about your shirt." Now, I've got a degree in chemistry, right? And I have read a little bit, including a few books about the history of fluoridation and what exactly it does. And I'm like, do you want the long version or the short version? Because I can go for 5 minutes, or I can go for an hour. How much patience do you have? And he goes, "Oh, just tell me. And I thought, okay, that's kind of weird. I asked him a very specific question, and he doesn't seem to care how much time he's going to spend here. And I said, seriously, do you want the long version or the short version? He goes, "Oh, just tell me. And I said, okay. So I jump into this thing about the history of fluoride. Or I don't remember what point I started from, but the important part is he let me get about 3 sentences in before he says something to the effect of, "Oh, no, that's bullshit. I heard somebody say that before, and they were a total idiot, so that's totally bullshit." Now, overlooking the total obvious fallacy there, I was taken back a little bit, where I'm like, what's bullshit? You didn't even let me speak. So I started over again, and it was the same thing. He let me get like 2 or 3 sentences in before he interrupts me and says something like that. And then I felt like I was like trying to start an engine, or like, you're trying to start a lawnmower and you keep pulling it and pulling it and pulling it, and it's not starting. And so we start this over. I keep starting over, and he keeps interrupting me. And at some point, I notice he's got this total shit-eating grin on his face. He's totally having fun. And he's kind of leaning back like this. And I felt like I was losing. And I was scratching my head at the time. I'm going, I'm trying to exchange information. What am I losing? We're not fighting. We're not playing basketball or something. Like, what the hell am I losing? Right? And a light bulb went off. Like, as Looney Tunes light bulb, boop, this thing pops up. Nima, what the hell are you showing me? Oh, the fluoride information. Got it. This light bulb pops off over my head, and I realize, no, wait a minute, I am fighting. This guy came over to make fun of me. He's not here to ask me about fluoride. He's here to make fun of me over my shirt. Can you turn the video back on? So, when this hit me, like, I even remember, like, I was trying to eat my food, and my fork was, like, halfway to my face. I had this stunning realization. And I put my fork down, I looked right over at him, and I said, if you don't change your tone of voice, I'm not telling you anything. Now, immediately, because all my friends are at this table, right? There's like this stunned silence at the table. Boom! Like, stuff just got tense. And you could tell, like, he had a little stun, but he shook it off, and he goes, oh, no, man. I just came over here to ask you for information. I want to know about fluoride. And I just kept staring at him, and I said, if you don't change your tone of voice, I'm not telling you anything. And we went through a couple iterations of this where he kept changing his response. At one point, it was, "Oh, hey, you're taking this too personally. Trying to throw this initiation of aggression over at me, right? Oh, you're taking this too seriously. I just came over. Oh, man, hey, I'm just over here trying to ask a question, and you're getting all mad and pushing around. And all I did was if you don't change your tone of voice, I'm not telling you anything. If you don't change your tone of voice, I'm not telling you anything. And by the third or fourth iteration, I raised my voice. If you don't change your tone of voice, I'm not telling you anything. The result was fascinating. The shit-eating grin melted off of his face. And his posture, because, he was like this. He slumped over onto the table. And his entire energy died down. And he dropped the whole fluoride thing. And then it wasn't long after that where he excused himself from the table and he went back to where he was sitting before. Now, two things happened from here. First off, for the rest of the weekend, if we ever bumped into each other, he treated me completely respectfully. And then the second thing, and this is even more fascinating, all my friends at the table, remember, and like, these are my friends, I trained with them, I've known them for like a year or whatever, right? They all lean into the table and they're like, oh my God, Dylan, don't you think that was a little rude? Like, the guy just came over to get some information and you yelled at him. Now, I don't remember what I said to them at that point, because I was like spinning with what I had just realized. But I will have something to say on the audience of whenever you get into a conflict. And so what I realized that day was we have this capacity as humans to reason and have discussion. And we also have the capacity as humans to fight. And now, fighting can look like, hey, we're going to duke it out here, right? Fighting can also look like, an argument where, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, no, I'm right, even if we're not exchanging blows. And what really, really hit me that day is that the manipulation trumps the reason. I'm going to explain that more as I go on. The manipulation trumps the reason, and that people can pretend to be reasonable when in reality they're manipulating you. Now, that probably doesn't surprise anybody. As I go through this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down a system that I created it, but I quasi stole it from somebody else. I'll explain that. I'm going to describe a system to you. Oh, we're back to the fluoride. Oh, but before we go on, Nima, was there anything that you wanted to touch on fluoride in drinking water? What study did you pull up?
Just one study that I pulled up earlier was from the National Library of Medicine, assessment of fluoride levels during pregnancy. and its association with early adverse pregnancy outcomes, results, conclusions: excess fluoride exposures can have deleterious effects on the expecting mother and fetus and is associated with adverse pregnancy outcomes. And then another study, also published in the National Library of Medicine, fluoride levels in osteosarcoma, which is a rare malignant bone tumor. Conclusions: these results suggest a link between fluoride exposure and osteosarcoma.
You sound like an absolute conspiracy theorist. Fluoride's good for your teeth, and that's the end of the story, Nima. God
Yeah.
damn. Like,
Sorry.
what are you doing? So anyway, going back to what I was saying. I'm going to give you some tools here that should shock you about halfway through. I'm going to start off, and it's going to sound mundane, and at some point this is going to switch, and suddenly all these light bulbs are going to turn on in your head if you keep listening. So, what I'm going to describe are some basic human interaction methods isn't even the right word. The basic way humans interact that we really don't understand, or no one's ever told us, and I'm about to tell you. A good way a good metaphor for this is I've read human beings are dealt cards to a game that they don't know how to play. I'm going to teach you the basics of that game today. And this fundamentally comes from an idea that I got from a book called Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson. And before a bunch of red flags go off about Robert Anton Wilson, I am not going to suggest moral subjectivism in this show. He jumps off into that. I took some pieces from him, and I went in a completely different direction, right? So this book, Prometheus Rising, goes over these 8, I'm going to talk about 4 today, these 8 different, he calls them circuits, that human beings are able to access. And the first 4 everybody gets access to, and the second 4 are more occult and mystical. I'm not talking about those that for the sake of this conversation. I'm not even going there. But the whole idea behind the book is how do you access your own circuits so you become less of a slave to the deterministic forces that make you up. For example, your genetics, or your epigenetics, or your conditioning and all this sort of stuff. How do you work in and affect your conditioning? And the book even shows this robot, that this is the front page of the book, this robot fallen over and cracked open, and this spirit-looking man coming out. Basically, you're trying to destroy the robotic aspect of yourself and let the free will out, right? That's the point of the book. I took this in a completely different direction. However, I am going to use a lot of the language that he either develops or steals from whoever he stole it from. Yeah, there's the front page of Prometheus Rising. So we are very easily manipulated because there's some basics that we don't understand about ourselves. And when we talk about the circuits of our own behavior, this is something that, I mean, we talked about Plato in the last show. Plato observes this in his Republic, and I'll allude to that as I go on. So I'm going to be breaking down how we access these 4 circuits and what they do and how we interact with each other with them. So the first circuit that we're born with, that all animal life has, we can call the biological survival circuit. In fact, I think that's even what Robert Anton Wilson calls it, where we have an instinctual urge to survive, and the dimension on which we utilize this instinct is spatial. We could go towards stuff, or we could run away from it, right? We could approach, or we could retreat. And an easy way to think about this is, I mean, imagine like a lion chasing a zebra, right? The lion is having a primal urge, I'm hungry, so it approaches the zebra, and the zebra has a primal urge of, I don't want to be eaten, so it runs away, right? Or, think of a baby, like, I'm hungry, I can't go there, but I could scream and make the mama come to me. I'm a single-celled life form, and I either need the sun or I don't need the sun, so I use my little flagella to move toward the sun, or use a little flagella to get away from the sun, right? Stuff like that. it's instinctual. There's no feeling behind it. It's just the basic instinct that we have to survive. And like I said, it operates in the spatial dimension where we can go towards stuff or move away from it. All human life, or excuse me, all life, animal life, excuse me, is born with this. And I mean, I guess you could even say like plant life and all types of life is born with this. Is born with this, and without it, we would just die. Right? So the more advanced circuit, we call this the second circuit, is we could call the emotional dominance circuit, which I can't remember if that's what Robert Anton Wilson refers to it as. Or we can just call it the emotional circuit and keep it simple. The emotional circuit in the human being, I would argue, really starts to show its full potential when the child becomes a toddler. And the emotional circuit is primarily interested in pecking order. And the dimension that it operates on is one of, I guess, the pecking order. It operates on dominance, where we could either submit to somebody else and they dominate us, or we could dominate them and they submit to us. So this is a win-lose sort of description, right? And it's, I mean, if you look at the toddler, you could say, okay, this is where the toddler figures out how to say no, which is to say, I won't submit to you, right? Like I have an ego that makes its own choices, and I'm not going to submit to you, so I'm going to say no. This is where this thing really starts to develop. And going back to the story that I just said at the beginning about the guy who came to my table, is this could be seen in posture, right? Remember what I described when I came over? His chest was out. He was, I'm making fun of this guy, whatever. And then when I challenged him, and I got him to back off, his posture slumped, right? And you can imagine. I think the easiest way to visualize this is like a pack of dogs or a pack of wolves, right? Dogs don't form committees. They don't have discussions. They don't have debates. There's an alpha dog that tells the other dogs what to do, and if they get in a fight and a dog loses, it curls up with its tails between its legs and it slinks off, kind of like this guy did when he left my table. So that's the emotional circuit, right? So we got the biosurvival circuit that works on approach and retreat. Now we've got the emotional circuit, which works on submit and dominate. Now, for most animal life, we stop there, right? Okay, maybe a dog can learn a few words and recognize words, but for most animal life, you got survival, and if they're a little bit more advanced, you've got emotions. If we move on one beyond that, now we get into the human realm. We have the rational circuit. And I would argue this starts to appear around ages 8 or 9. And also, I want to preface this. I understand what I'm saying is completely oversimplified, right? Obviously, babies show emotion before they're 2 years old, and obviously toddlers can have some sort of sense of reason, right? But when I'm describing these things, I'm saying them at a time when they really become fully functional, right? Not that the person becomes good at using them, but they become fully functional and fully accessible. So around the ages 8 or 9, you can start reasoning things out. And I think a good example of this, I remember when I was in first grade, when I was 7, I started learning my multiplication tables. And then I believe when I was in third grade, we started learning why multiplication works, right? So in first grade, you're like, well, 5 times 5 is 25, and you get rewarded by saying that's the right answer. Good job! Or that's the wrong answer. Try again, right? In third grade, when I'm 9, my teacher pulls out and says, okay, if we've got 5 rocks, and we do 5 rocks 5 times, we add up all the rocks, we could see why 5 times 5 equals 25. That's the reason why 5 times 5 equals 25. You probably couldn't have explained that to me very well when I was 7. I mean, maybe 7, but I mean, if you go back to 5, like, forget it, right? So the realm of reason is exclusive to humans, other than, like I said, okay, a dog can learn a few words or something, right? Or some primates can learn basic sign language for a couple hundred words or something. But this circuit is very interesting when we ask, what dimension does it exist on? And it really exists on any number of dimensions because the circuit is so semantic. we can actually create and destroy dimensions as part of our discussion. And this is the circuit where we finally see the realm of logic, right? And I'm not going to take the time to go, this isn't a logic course, right? But I do want to basically say this, which is the essence of logic is the syllogism, right? Where we say, okay, I make observation 1, I make observation 2, and then, by the way, you got some commercials going on your TV in the background there, Nima. I don't know if you noticed. You make observation 1, you make observation 2, there's something connecting the two, and then you can say, okay, I can extrapolate a third idea based on these two observations. And the classical way of understanding or the classical syllogism that Aristotle put forth is, okay, Socrates is a man, all men are mortal. These are two observations. These two observations are connected to each other by the word man, or men, plural. And then, therefore, I can extrapolate, therefore, Socrates is mortal, even though I haven't actually seen him die in front of me yet. So, that's why they call, this is why the term rational animal has, through history, been applied to describe humans, because we're able to create ratio, like, there's a ratio of the terms that I just said with that syllogism, in order to proof calculus, boy, logic. Okay, there we go. We're able to extract an understanding that isn't immediately observable based on things that we have observed, right? Now, this is where I'm really leaping from Prometheus Rising and Robert Anton Wilson, because he seems to take this down a track of how everything gets subjective, because we could just invent whatever words we want and whatever dimensions we want and create and destroy them at will. Therefore, things are really subjective. I am not doing that at all, right? I'm saying I'm arguing that things are objective. It gets, words are hard, words are tricky, but things still are objective. Now, in the semantic world, in the rational world, we can actually create win-win situations. This is opposed to the emotional circuit where there's win-lose situations. In the rational world, we could have a discussion. I could say, hey, Nima, you and I are having a conflict. Let's discuss this and figure out what you want, figure out what I want, and maybe we could come together where both of us both get what we want. So we can have win-win discussions on the rational circuit. Now, there's one more circuit I want to get to, which is the fourth circuit, and I would simply call it the moral circuit. I think Robert Anton Wilson refers to this as like the sexual taboo circuit or something like that. And again, he takes this down this road of moral subjectivity, where he basically says, at the age of puberty, we start to be able to understand. Or not, I understand it's not the right word, conceptualize right or wrong, and the society uses this time to imprint, how they're going to understand right or wrong, and it's completely wrapped up around sex and reproduction, because the way your society goes depends on how you control reproduction of the next generation. And what I want to point out with this is that around the age of puberty, because the person has their, sexual functioning awakened, for lack of a better term, they are able to now conceptualize right and wrong. And now I'm not saying we objectively know what right and wrong is just because we can conceptualize it, but we can conceptualize it. And so this is a moral dimension that it works on, where we can say, okay, things are right or things are wrong. So we've got these four circuits that I've just described. And I'm referring to Robert Anton Wilson. This stuff is old. Plato recognizes these in the Republic, right? Where he looks at three things where he and I forgot the terms that these get translated into English, but basically you have your instinctual aspect of yourself, you have the passionate aspect of yourself, and you have the reasonable aspect of yourself. And when you read the book, you can see he kind of wraps the moral and reasonable into the same circuit, where he says stuff like, the rational man makes his appropriate sacrifices to the gods, right? He wraps it up, but it's very clearly along the same lines of what I just described. Now, what I just said is probably maybe you haven't thought about it explicitly, but even if you haven't, you're like, yeah, that makes sense, and I'm not really surprised, and that's not really shocking to me. So I want to say, get 2 rules to apply to this map that I drew out. If I'm correct, the first rule shouldn't shock you. The second rule is going to change things, and that's where the discussion can come from. So the first rule is, and remember I said we're dealt cards to a game that we don't know how to play? Okay, I just described you the game board. Now I'm going to start describe to you how the basic moves work. The first rule is that in order for us to communicate with each other, we have to be on the same circuit. What do I mean by that? If I'm attempting to have a rational conversation with Nima, and he's running away from me, we're obviously not having a rational conversation. If Nima is screaming at me, and I'm trying to make a moral critique of what he did with his knight last night, we're not having a moral discussion. There's a screaming match. That shouldn't shock you. Here's the shocker. So first, we have to be on the same circuit in order to interact with each other. The second rule is that the lower circuit sets the interaction. We're now about ready to talk about manipulation. What do I mean by that? The lower circuit sets the interaction. So let's bring up the examples that I just gave of different circuits. If I'm trying to have a rational conversation with Nima and he's running away from me, what sort of interaction are we having? We're having a first circuit interaction. It doesn't matter if I'm trying to have a rational conversation. Nima is making it a first circuit interaction by engaging in first circuit behavior. If Nima's screaming at me and I'm trying to have a moral critique on the fourth circuit, we are having a second circuit interaction because Nima is setting the tone by dropping his circuit, and the fact that I'm trying to have discuss moral conundrums is irrelevant. Sorry, I forgot to turn my phone on mute. The fact that I'm trying to have a moral discussion is irrelevant. Now, again, this might not seem too new to you until I bring up the nuance between Circuit 2 and Circuit 3. So if Nima's screaming at me, we're obviously having a fight, an emotional fight. It's clear, it's obvious to anyone who's seeing it. However, when we talk about the rules of the Third Circuit, because I said, okay, Third Circuit is the realm of logic. I will step even one step further to say the Third Circuit is governed by the rules of logic, right? So if the basic building block of logic is the syllogism, as I described before, if we're not utilizing syllogisms, and I don't mean to say that everything we have to just connect one syllogism after each other to have a discussion. We never have time to do that. But everything that we discuss, in order to be logically consistent, must be able to be broken down in syllogism form, right? So if the syllogism and the usage of proper logic is required in order to engage on the Third Circuit, what that means is if we're not using proper logic, by definition, it can't be the Third Circuit. And if it's not the Third Circuit, there's only one place for it to go, which is down to the Second Circuit. And there's a art form, if we can use that term tongue-in-cheek, called sophistry. And sophistry, I would argue, is the art form of appearing to be logical or appearing to be moral, when in reality, you're attempting to dominate the other person. I'm going to say that again. You're appearing to be logical, but in reality, you're dominating the other person. This is manipulation. I would define this as manipulation. And thank you for bringing up sophist on Wikipedia there. I think it's worth pointing this out. The story of sophistry, because ironically, in ancient Greek, or probably even modern Greek, the word Sophia means wisdom, And during the time of Socrates, there were these guys who called themselves the sophists because they were very wise. And the story goes that Socrates went to these guys one by one and figured out they were a bunch of idiots. And therefore, the term sophist turned into, colloquially turned into a word that meant bullshitter, basically. And we've managed to keep the term for like 2,500 years, right? So the sophist... I want to talk about the psychology of this, because now that I've presented the game board and 2 basic rules to the game, which is we got to be on the same circuit to interact with each other, and that the lower circuit sets the interaction. Because the sophist is pretending to be reasonable, what they're trying to do is make you reasonable. And while you maintain being reasonable, and in reality, they're being unreasonable, they're having a second circuit or win-lose interaction while you're trying to have a third circuit or possibly fourth circuit win-win interaction. Keep put our videos back on. And what they're doing, whether this is conscious or subconscious or whatever, what they're doing is they want the benefit of being able to dominate you, but they don't want the risk of you retaliating. I mean, this is cowardice in a fucking nutshell, right? They want all the benefits of dominating you, and they don't want the risk of you retaliating. So let me describe this with a metaphor. I like to call this the chess dilemma, or you could also say smart person problems. So I think chess and the rules of chess are very analogous to logic and the rules of logic. So, chess has very specific rules. You have a very specific game board, very specific pieces that have very specific moves, and you achieve victory in a very specific way. And I don't think it's a far cry to say if you're not following those rules, you're not playing chess. You're doing something else, but it's not chess. Similarly to logic, if you're not following the rules of logic, even if you're almost following it, you're not doing logic. You're doing something else. You're doing manipulation, like I'm arguing here. And so, if you're playing chess with somebody, if Nima and I are playing chess, and he's following the rules, and I start making stuff up, you know, this knight in this situation, instead of going 2 in one direction and 1 in the other, and actually goes 3 in one direction and 1 in the other. And I'm sorry that you were stupid and you don't understand that the more arcane rules of chess, but that's the actual rule, and I get to use that to take your queen in this case. Now, Nima has 2 options here, right? He could be like, I understand the rules of chess, and that's not one of them. No, I'm not letting you do that. Or, this is what most people do. They go, oh man, this guy's really good at chess. I really need to bring my chess game and really focus on making sure that I have all my energy to making that I play this chess game following all the rules properly. This is what most people do when they encounter a sophist. The person comes up to them, manipulating them. And by the way, the traditional way to identify this is by understanding logical fallacies, which I'm not knocking. I highly recommend learning. It's just there's no need for me to go over that here because there's plenty of resources about that, and it's not central to understanding what I'm talking about. But the traditional way to identify this is utilizing logical fallacies. So, for whatever reason, smart people, they don't want to fight. And so when they pick up the fact that someone is manipulating them, they double down on being reasonable. Now, as I just described, the lower circuit sets the interaction. So if someone's being manipulative to you and you respond by being more reasonable, you lose by default. If we go back to the chess example that I just described with Nima, and he's playing chess and I'm cheating, if he continues trying to play chess, he's not winning at chess, he's losing at whatever game that I'm playing. By default, because he's not even addressing it. And so if we go back to the story that I started this out with, the guy coming over to my table, what did he do? He was pretending to have a rational discussion, but in reality he was making fun of me, which of course is a form of domination. And what did he do when I called him out? This fascinates me. The first thing he did was he tried to say, oh, hey, I'm trying to have a discussion. Please continue telling me the information about fluoride, which was trying to keep me on the Third Circuit. And when I challenged his tone, what I did was I was completely throwing out any notion of Third Circuit, and I addressed him directly on Second Circuit, basically saying, I am prepared to fight you. And I made it open. Like, there's none of this playing around of like, oh, we're pretending to have a conversation. He tried to push me back into having a conversation, and I kept at it. Then he says I'm taking it too personally. Then he says I'm picking on him, which is to say, I'm the bully. He admits that this is a Second Circuit interaction, but I'm the one trying to dominate him. Well, I guess I was at this point, but he's basically saying I'm starting the fight, and I kept at it. And like I said, I mean, you could see it with the broken posture. He got up, he went away, and two fascinating things happened. The first one is after that, he treats me respectfully the entire rest of the weekend. But the second and most important thing, I would argue, is the friends at the table. What happened? They all leaned in and blamed me for starting the fight. I would argue we are now having a conversation on the fallibility of the human condition. And I'm going to take this into Narcissist Workshop, maybe not on this show, but maybe a next one.
Well, your friends also kind of took it to the moral circuit, right?
Yes. Did you have anything to follow up with that, or are you just pointing it out?
I was just wondering. I was just
well, and then thank you for bringing this up, because I think it's important to look at the nuance between the moral and the intellectual circuits. Is logic actually works just fine on the moral circuit as well. The only difference is in the Third Circuit you're talking about is. In the moral circuit you're talking about should. And I'm not here to talk about how you get to an is from a should. That's someone else can have that conversation. I'm just recognizing that they're there. And so, for the sake of what I'm talking about, we could be having a Fourth Circuit discussion or a Third Circuit discussion. But the Second Circuit sophistry bullshit does the same thing to either one. Did that answer? Sounds like I'm boring Nima to death over there. Did that address what you were thinking of?
Sorry, did
my explanation address your curiosity of looking at the fact that the friends around the table seem to be having a Fourth Circuit reaction instead of a Third Circuit reaction? Maybe.
I guess not. I mean, it got me stumped, I guess.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what you're asking me.
Oh, okay, never mind. Well, I'll just reemphasize, for the sake of this discussion, we could have a really long conversation on what exactly is happening between the Third and the Fourth Circuit, and what it means to have a discussion on the Third Circuit and what it means to have a discussion on the Fourth Circuit. For the sake of this conversation now, which is identifying manipulation and also what to do about it, is I'm kind of wrapping the Third and Fourth Circuit into one sphere and saying, okay, the sophist can come and use this technique of pretending to be Third Circuit or pretending to be Fourth Circuit, when in reality they're on Second Circuit. It achieves the same manipulative garbage. Mm-hmm. So going back to the friends at the table, I think this is really the crux of the issue. So this guy comes over. He wants to make fun of me. First of all, I don't even realize what's happening, right? Most people are in that zone where they don't even realize what's happening. When I realized what happened, I also had to make a choice that my friends proved, is that when I challenged him and I got him to back off, they all blamed me for starting the fight. Even though for the first time, I saw clearly what was happening. This guy came over and started a fight with me. This is the holy fucking grail of sophistry. Right? It's one thing that I can come pick on you and you don't necessarily understand what's going on and you get trapped in the Third Circuit and you don't understand, you're getting manipulated and pushed around and all that stuff. The second thing is I know, because people don't know this stuff, again, it doesn't matter if this is conscious or subconscious or not, that if you defend yourself, everyone's going to blame you for starting the fight. So not only do you have to fight me, who's trying to come manipulate you, you got to fight everybody else. Everybody listening to this, usually when I explain this, people start thinking of, oh my God, there was the one time and the coworker and my fucking family and my, right. I'm telling you the rules of the game that you got dealt cards to that you never learned how to play. These are the basic rules of this game. So, what do? Here, let me caveat this by saying there's all sorts of things that you could do. But there's one thing I recommend that you don't do, which is to continue to be reasonable. If you find yourself in a situation like this, which is probably all the time because this is how humans interact with each other, we are completely at the mercy of sophistry. And hopefully this is helping end that situation. We're completely at the mercy of sophistry, and this happens to people all the time. The one thing to not do, the surefire way to lose, is to continue being reasonable, which hurts smart people down to their core. Because they feel like, oh, but if I start doing what he's doing, or I get in his face, or I become openly hostile, I'm coming down to his level, and that's bad. No, it's bad that you just sit there and take it like a bitch. So this is where courage is required to not only take it down a notch to the second, or 2 notches to the Second Circuit and fight this guy. The courage is also required that if you have an audience, you got to be prepared to fight them too. Now, I will say this. This is another fascinating observation that I've found, because most people don't understand this difference between, we'll say, the dominance zone, or the emotional conflict zone, and the rational zone, and that the fact that the emotional dominance zone trumps the rational zone. Because they don't understand that nuance, they typically follow the nearest alpha. So they're not actually listening to the reason half the time, 90% of the time. They're not actually listening to the rational aspects of what's going on. They're looking at who's the alpha. And if you back off, and you just lump over and you keep keep trying to play chess and you lose, well, you're clearly not the alpha. And what I found is that, okay, if I got an audience, somebody comes to me, I growl at them, they back off, and then the audience tries to take me on. I go, and I growl at the audience too, and they all back off. And what happens then is you become the alpha. You gain the status, right? I mean, it's so stupid that it works like this. It's so frustrating that it works like this, but this is the way it works. And I want to tell this to people, because if you're smart and you've got smart person problems and you keep engaging in the chess dilemma, nobody wants to listen to you because you just lose all the time.
Yeah. This kind of also illustrates the clown world paradigm, I think,
Yeah?
to an extent. Because at this point, the people who've been reading the globalist, elitists' books and who've been predicting what's going to come down the road and who have empirical observations, etc., they have done so much work and so much intellectual circuit work that at this point they don't find it fruitful necessarily to engage in this kind of in this intellectual circuit anymore, and find it much more effective to just make fun of the mainstream. So which is, I guess, taking it down to the emotional circuit level.
Which is great. It's like, finally.
Which is where they operate.
It's finally.
Which is where they operate.
Yes.
Yeah, this is where they operate all the time. They never give us intellectual arguments. They always manipulate emotionally, and they actually emotionally manipulate physically if need be.
Well, and they pretend to be intellectual, right? On the news,
Well,
we'll have
they pretend
a
to
debate.
be more than
Yeah.
So I just wanted to run through this here,
Yeah.
the four circuits, with an example of the stabbies, for example.
Oh, yeah.
The
Panaceas of God. Yes. I think we all know what we're talking
gene
about.
therapy injections, a campaign that was launched in 2021 because of a emotional scare that was kicked off in 2020. But basically, if I want to look at this from an emotional circuit perspective, they pretend to be on the moral circuit. You have to do this because it's the right thing to stop the spread of this terrible disease, and who are you to not do that? And then if you challenge that with give me evidence, then they will pretend to go to the intellectual circuit. Look, here's studies.
Here's
by,
27 doctors who all agree with us that we've handpicked. Yeah.
Here's a signed letter by 30 doctors, or here's Pfizer study, here's Moderna study. Here are studies that are conducted by completely selfless paragons of virtue who've concluded that this thing is 95% effective. Okay, so there's a number, 95%. It sounds convincing, sounds good. So who are you to question us? And then you come back with, well, these numbers don't make any sense because of X, Y, and Z. And here's other numbers that prove your numbers wrong. So how about that? At that point, they will go, oh, okay, so we tried pretending logic. It didn't work on you. So now we're going to get emotional on you. Now we're going to show you, oh, look at this dying grandma who on her deathbed talks about how she wishes she would have taken the vaccine. They actually literally came out with several articles like that. 3 people on their deathbeds, and the ultimate thing they thought of was, I wish I would have taken the vaccine. And they were all, they had all kinds of co-conditions, etc.
Yep.
And then you say, well, I don't... I'm not impressed by your emotional attacks. And then they will go, all right, okay, the moral bullshit didn't work, the intellectual bullshit.
Yeah.
So now we're just going to force you to take this damn shot. And if you don't, we'll kick you.
We'll fire you.
We'll fire you
shut
from
your
your
business
job.
down. Yeah.
We'll shut you out of grocery stores. We won't let you go to the gym. I mean, there's several countries where they actually did those kinds of things. So it's almost like kind of, if one circuit doesn't work, you fall back on the next one and the next one and the next one until you're down to brute force, basically.
Yeah. Well, and then also to emphasize what I was saying, there never was a fourth or third circuit. They're pretending fourth and third circuit, right? The whole thing set up to look like fourth and third circuit, but the reality is we need to dominate you into doing what we say, right?
Yeah.
So, what I'm suggesting here, because hopefully you listening to this, like I said, at first you're like, okay, where's this guy going? And then hopefully there was a point where you're like, whoa, wait a minute. I never thought about it this way. Is that what I want to do with this map, and this is how I use it, is I want to speed up my ability to recognize when I'm getting manipulated. And I have my own special nomenclature for this that I use for myself, if you choose to use it. I call it the 3-2 slip, where you think you're having a third circuit or fourth circuit conversation, but then you realize, ooh, there's some manipulation going on here. What I'm suggesting is the second you realize what that's happening, you stop pretending to have a rational conversation. Now, I do need to say this with a caveat, right? Right now, I've just been describing the board, and I've been describing the rules. Now we're kind of getting into, okay, here's some strategies how to play the game. And I want to emphasize, kind of like martial arts, there's no way that I could sit here and talk to you and tell you what to do and have you learn anything practically useful without you going out and figuring it out yourself. And furthermore, there's no like, this is the way to do it. Like there's a million different martial arts. People are figuring out new shit all the time. I mean, whether you look at UFC or boxing or whatever, people are figuring stuff out all the time. There's various different ways to approach this sort of stuff, and I do want to emphasize I do have my own way of approaching this, and I tend to be a little more forceful and a little more in people's faces, but just because I'm doing it that way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. So that said, when I recognize it,
What Dylan is saying that if you practice this intellectual toe lock, it'll be a completely new method that your opponents aren't used to.
correct.
Who are used to maybe takedowns and standard.
No, what they're
Kimuras,
used to is
whatever
you
move.
just fucking standing there and getting pummeled in the face. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That chess move made sense. I'll try this. King's Gambit. Oh, okay, that didn't work. Well, maybe I should most people just stand there and take it. So, when you recognize that this is happening, and there's going to be further shows because I have more symbolic maps to help you recognize that this is happening. When you recognize that this is happening, you've got a choice to make. Now, there is an instance where you should continue to pretending to be reasonable. I mean, for example, let's say somebody's got a gun pointed to your head and they're giving you sophist bullshit. And if you don't pretend to be reasonable, they're going to shoot you in the head. Yeah, go ahead and continue pretending to be reasonable, right? You got a First Circuit problem pointed to your head. The entirety of this discussion actually revolves around the fact that we live in a civilized society where we're not like actively shooting each other for the most part if we disagree with each other, right? For the most part, you're not going to get smacked in the face if you're in a disagreement because we live in this civilized society. So this operates on the idea that, okay, if I go into the Second Circuit, we're not going to have a First Circuit problem. Although I would, another conversation that we could have is you if you're prepared to have that, to deal with that, you'll get a lot better at this too. So when I recognize that a 3-2 slip, as I like to term it, has happened, I drop the pretense immediately. And I'm pretty sure, an audience who doesn't recognize this, I mean, it looks like I'm bipolar when I do this because I recognize what happened and they didn't. And so, personally, I don't have a lot of time for it. And what I like to do is give the person one warning. Like, hey, I realize we're having a fight here. You can either drop the bullshit or I'm going to fight back. Typically, they don't recognize that I just did that, so they keep pushing, and then I bare my teeth and I go, oh man, I'm just trying to have a conversation. Yeah, that's what I thought. But the faster you could speed this up, the faster you could deal with it. And what will happen is if you start doing this, you're going to start finding out who is a parasite to you in your life. So this was fascinating for me too. So I'm out in Europe, and I figured this stuff out, and I'm able to figure this stuff out because I'm listening to the Trivium, I'm reading Robert Anton Wilson's Prometheus Rising, and I'm putting these ideas together. And like I said, that night at the sauna with the guy who came to my table, the light bulb went off, and I was able to put all this stuff together. As you start to apply this, when I came home, I left Washington State. I didn't come back for almost 4 years. And when I came home, this was so fascinating. I had the naive assumption, because I had all this growth and I had all these amazing experiences and I learned all these new things. I figured everybody else had learned and grew and become better people while I was gone. Man, was I dumb. That totally didn't happen at all. And so what I found was the people who had manipulated me in the past, it was like them trying to put me straight back into the box where I had come out of. And I was like, no, I'm not interested in this in the least a little bit, no. And I did the same thing. What I just described was like, okay, if you want to fight with me, let's go. I'll bare my teeth at you and I'll fight. 2 things happened. One was a group of people that went, okay, this guy that I know is doing something different. Let me learn and adjust. The second group of people pushed it harder. Like, I'm not going to back off of the manipulation. I'm going to push it and push it and push it and push it. And what I found out was, oh, look at the people that I don't need in my life anymore. This Like, again, these are the basic cards. I mean, these are the basic rules to the game that you got dealt cards to that you don't know how to play. And when you learn these rules and you start playing it, suddenly you're going to find out who's taking advantage of you. I mean, at least in your immediate sphere. I mean, we can apply this societally and it gets more complicated, but at least in your immediate sphere, you can very quickly start to figure out who is trying to take advantage of you and who is not interested in the slightest bit of having an equal relationship with you. They need you to be submissive. And I mean, family members are usually the ones that won't back off. I got a lot of family members I don't talk to anymore. I am completely disinterested in talking to them because no matter how clearly I made it, I am not putting up with this. I mean, as soon as they thought, oh, God, you know, I could try to get over here. He's not paying attention. Bam, they were on it. I just don't need that. I am completely disinterested in having that. So, again, as a society, you in your life, listening to this, and again, usually when I start talking about this, people start thinking of these 400 different examples that they could just think of off the top of their head of how they get manipulated with this sort of stuff. Is that when you recognize, I mean, these are your coworkers. This is a boss. This is a family member. This is a friend. This is a whatever. You can start getting control of yourself and stop being a host to other parasites. And again, my whole thing is speed, because let's go back to the basic idea of this. I'm calling this intellectual self-defense, and I came to this route originally from learning the trivium, which is to say, okay, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, and for the moment we just call it logic for simplicity's sake. One of the things I recognize with learning the trivium and learning the logical fallacies is, so what? Okay, here's this guy using a logical fallacy against you, and you're like, well, you are committing the no true Scotsman fallacy. You are committing an ad hominem. You are committing a whatever fallacy. You think a sophist gives a shit? Of course he is. Like, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. Fuck you. Right? And I'm going to keep doing it. And I don't care that you pointed it out. And a good sophist will be able to spin it and throw it back at you. And particularly a narcissist won't work on them at all. I mean, you'll just throw yourself into a fucking abyss if you try that on a narcissist. So, this is applied logic, I would say, because logic operates on the third circuit. You could use that logic to identify when you're being manipulated, but no one tells you what to do once you've been manipulated. These rules of the game, the breakdown of these circuits, yes, they're oversimplified. I understand. You can get a psychologist to talk to me and say, no, things don't break down that simply. Fine, I know, but this works, right? Try it and it'll work. Is if you learn to identify that, and again, logical fallacies are a great way to do it. I think they're a little bit slow, but they work great. Once you learn how to identify how to do that and you act on it, you will have a completely different experience in life. A completely different experience in life. And at first, you're going to be so terrified to do it because you spent your whole life being other people. You're going to spend your whole life being another person's bitch. And the first time it happens, ask me why I know this. The first time it happens, you are going to completely fucking overreact. Like, okay, this guy's been punching me in the face for however many years we've had this relationship, so I'm going to pop him back one, and you're going to try to pop him back one, and you're going to hit him so hard he's going to, like, fly through 3 walls. Because you have all this pent-up shit that explodes out of you, and you're going to be afraid to have that happen, so you don't want to do it, right? So just do it. Well, there's going to be a couple casualties on the way, but if you don't learn this, you're just somebody else's bitch. You are just somebody else's bitch. And as far as I've been able to tell, the way I describe it is the fastest way that I've seen to identify it and figure out what to do about it. Nima, if I keep talking, I'm gonna be moving on to the next stages of Dylan's intellectual self-defense symbolism, symbolic maps. So I think for the sake of today, I want to leave it there. Did you have any questions, comments, or jokes on this level of stuff?
I think I already pointed out that this is kind of useful to illustrate our entire relationship with our media and
Yes.
with our government, with the institutions that we were raised to look at as Fourth Circuit or Third Circuit conversation partners who are interested in bringing us good moral values and who are interested in engaging with us intellectually. Except once you actually do those things, you notice that they're absolutely not interested in a dialogue. It's more like
Yes.
they give you the authorized opinions, and they may sound moral or intellectual, but really what they're doing is just talking at you and browbeating you into ultimately just doing whatever they say at the end of the day. So really like a First Circuit goal that they have in mind
Right.
ultimately.
Well, and then I'm glad you pointed that out, because I tend to emphasize this in terms of people's personal relationships, because I think that's the most immediate thing affecting most people is the people in your life manipulating you is the most the biggest manipulation that you personally have in your life, right? But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it shows you how useful the appearance of morality
Yes,
is.
that's a good
It's
point.
incredibly important to those who wish to dominate you on the most rudimentary levels. The appearance of morality and of moral authority is incredibly important. Because I think to the uninitiated it may seem weird. So why do they, if they just want to brutalize me into this or that agenda, then why do they appear to be morally
Because you'll stand
superior?
down.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's much cheaper to dominate a population that just stands down based on your supposedly moral commands than actually having to fight everyone all the time.
Well, and that reminds me of something I wanted to mention this too, is that one of the reasons what I'm describing is so effective at defending yourself intellectually is because if we go back to the sophist, call him the run-of-the-mill sophist, is that they want the benefit of dominating you because they are engaging in a Second Circuit interaction, but they want to keep you on the Third Circuit so you don't fight back, meaning they don't want the risk of you retaliating. So if you retaliate, they got something better to do. They didn't sign up for that shit. I mean, think about it. If you had a, in quotes, courageous bully, I know no bully is ultimately courageous, but there is a difference between the sophist who can't handle a fight and the guy who's willing to come up to you and push you and be like, hey, fuck you, I think your face is ugly, right? That's an open Second Circuit challenge, right? Everybody could see what's happening there. Whereas
It's actually a very honorable challenge compared to the sophists'
right,
pseudo challenge.
right, and so
Remember our friend David pointed out how much he appreciates Irv Rubin, his nemesis, Irv Rubin, who got him beaten up and chased around college campuses and all that. David said, well, what I appreciated about Irv is I knew exactly where I stood with him.
right,
There was no pretense of intellectualism or morality.
right. So fundamentally, sophists are cowards. Because if they weren't, they do what we just said. They come up and push you and be like, fuck you, I don't like your face. So if they're fundamentally cowards, if you show your teeth, they run away. Tail between the legs. It just happens all the time. I mean, it gets sweet when you've done it enough. and you can see it coming and you do it again. It's a very, very sweet feeling. And then particularly if you know how to challenge the audience. Because again, if they didn't recognize what was going on, then when you bare your teeth at them too, they're going to back off as well. In fact, I don't know if you remember this. It'd be interesting to dig it up. So Stefan Molyneux over at Free Domain Radio, or he's dropped the radio now, and it's just Free Domain. he's done this call-in show for, since the early swirlings of time, where but people call in and discuss with him. And there was this one show where this guy called in named Fritz. And I don't even remember what Fritz was discussing about, but at some point, Stefan gets really mad at him and just starts chastising his ass. And I remember when I was listening to the show, I mean, it was like a minute into the show where I'm like, this Fritz person is trying to pull a 3-2 slip on Stefan. I saw it like instantaneously. And I was actually irritated that Stefan put up with his shit for so long. And so I listened to it, and I'm like, oh, okay, we move on to the next caller, and I got over it. And apparently, the listeners of that show had such a backlash against Steph because they're like, wow, you were so mean to this guy, and he didn't even do anything. And I was like, motherfucker, I recognized it in a minute, what this guy was doing. How come nobody else recognized it? And then Stefan had to actually do a follow-up show challenging the audience, like I just said, right? By the way, Steph, if you see this, you know everything I'm talking about here. I don't think you've described it like I've described it, but I learned a lot on how to maneuver in these realms by listening to you. But anyway, on that show in particular, it fascinated me that nobody else saw what happened. I couldn't believe it. And I mean, sometimes I think about, I developed this thing, and I'm like, oh, how really interesting is it? Is it really that cool? Is it really that useful? And then I see something like that where I'm like, fuck! Everybody still doesn't get this at all. And what happens is at a societal level, we end up worshiping bullshitters and manipulators because we can't recognize what's happening. We can't fundamentally recognize what's happening. Oh, good luck finding that show that I've just described. It was one of the call-in shows that had some title that I don't remember what it was. So if anyone can remember Steph's call with the annoying fucker Fritz, send it to me, because that would be a interesting thing to show around.
I think it's funny, like, there's not even a search function, Steph has given up on making anything searchable because there's just too much content.
Well, I think particularly after he lost...
Probably is one somewhere.
No, here's the search function right here, right there. Scroll down.
Where?
Go down. See right there? There's a search function right there. You can search inside that little play thingy. Or at least you used to be able to. Maybe I'm a liar. Maybe I'm a liar.
Well, where do you see it?
I remember once upon a time searching through shows with that thing.
Yeah, I mean,
apparently you can't anymore.
Yeah, there must be one somewhere. It's just like not very easy to.
Yeah.
see.
Well, and especially after he got kicked off of YouTube and he lost all his stuff, I think that it was difficult to they had to go back and find everything and reload it or re-upload it.
Which is why we don't rely on YouTube.
But at a societal level, people don't get this at all. And when they don't get it, again, when a fight happens, even people who are listening to someone like Stefan Molyneux on a regular basis don't see it happen, and they blame Steph for starting a fight. When I saw what was happening, I mean, it was like 60 seconds. I figured out what was up with Fritz. Like, Stefan, please flip this guy on his ass and pin him and move on to the next caller. I'm sick of this guy. They didn't recognize it. So because I'm not even saying as a society, as a species, we don't recognize this, of course we're going to keep getting the same manipulative outcomes and control freak outcomes in society. Of course, we're going to keep getting the same thing, and until we recognize it, I don't think we can fundamentally change. But this even goes back to what we were saying. It was either the last show or the one before, when we were talking about free will, and we were talking about our Illuminati overlords who see us as robotic automatons that don't have any free will, and we just respond to stimuli, and people like Charles Merriam come up with psychological. What's the word I want? Subgroups called behavioralism that says, okay, we can understand behavior of human beings by just seeing how they react to stimuli. Well, that's true if you don't understand how to utilize your upper circuits, and this is I'll give Robert Anton Wilson some credit here again for the cover of that book, which is a robot that's broken and fallen over and cracked out. A quasi spiritual human being floats out of it, right?
Yeah, I mean it reminds me a little bit of the ancient archetypes, such as the Minotaur, and I don't know. There's like some zodiac signs where the human comes out of basically it's half human, half horse. So anything that's half animal and the top half is human, it's supposed to be symbolic of the human rising rising
Outside
above
of the animal.
the animal. Yeah, so this is kind of like that same idea, but applied to a robot, I guess, which is
Right.
interesting because a robot is, I guess, is supposed to be way more advanced in terms of technological development than some animal, obviously.
I think we're
But-
stretching the metaphor and losing its
Yeah.
meaning. I think the robot was more you're programmable and you don't have a soul. You don't have the ability to make your own choices because you're completely
Yeah,
programmable.
so same idea, I guess.
And you only
You
respond to
rise
stimuli.
above, yeah, you rise above the animal, or you rise above the automaton.
Right. And that I believe personally, as our Illuminati overlords, the guys trying to control the world, they create systems and they create social structures that emphasize pushing us and keeping us trapped inside these lower circuits. Because if we are trapped inside these lower circuits, then we do just respond to stimuli. And I argued on the previous show that I believe that free will is something more of a gradient, not an on-off switch. And so the more they could push us toward the deterministic side of that gradient, the more their math works. And so what I'm arguing here is that I'm providing you the literal tools. Like I said, human beings are dealt cards to a game they don't know how to play. I just told you the game, and I just told you how the cards, how the rules work, and I gave you some basics on strategy on how to play the game. This alone will put you, above 98% of the population in terms on how you understand when someone is being manipulated or someone is manipulating you. And I don't know how to keep going without going into the next steps, because actually let me foreshadow what I'd like to talk about next, not on this show but the next one, is that I do believe you mentioned archetypes. I do believe that there are some psychological archetypes where they interact with these circuits on this game board so differently from you that you don't understand what they're doing, and you really lose against them because they're playing a completely different strategy than you are. And we'll foreshadow this. It's like, okay, we talked about the sophist, but what if we talk about a narcissist, right? Does the strategy that I just suggested work on a narcissist? Heads up, no, it doesn't. But what do you do against someone like a narcissist? We'll save. I'll save that for the next round. But Nima, if you didn't have any other comments on it, I wanna stop what I said. Stop what I said here. Nod.
Yeah, I'm nodding.
Yeah, nodding. Okay.
I don't know what else to say.
All right. Well, that being the case, I hope that was enlightening and entertaining as well. One thing about intellectual self-defense, particularly when you talk about logic, is it's so dry and boring. It makes you want to fall asleep immediately. Hopefully, I didn't do that in this conversation. And hopefully you could take this and apply it to your life. So this has been Dylan Moore and Nima Majur of IridaTV, which you can find at irida.tv. Put a dot right there. And follow us at the social media of your choice. Like, subscribe, comment, send us hate mail. We'll take it all. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.